Hi, I'm Dr. Owen Allphin with Allphin Veterinary Clinic. We've had a practice here for over 22 years in Branson, West Missouri. I'm just here to talk for a few minutes about some things that we commonly get questions about. And one of the most common ones is about nutrition of their pets. We're going to talk mostly about dog nutrition, but a lot of these principles that we're going to teach carry over to cat food as well. So I'm going to answer a few questions for you today. The first one, how do I know what to feed my pet? That's a really common question. A lot of people aren't sure. There's so many different brands of pet foods out there on the market, and it's really hard to sift through and find out exactly which one's the best one or which one's going to give the best nutrition for your pet. Some of these next questions actually will help with answering the first question. Next, who do I trust for nutrition advice? One of the things you want to look at with any kind of a source is what are their credentials. For example, if I'm going on the internet to find information about nutrition advice, for myself, I'm going to look for somebody who has more credentials than I do. I'm a doctor of veterinary medicine. I'm going to look for somebody that maybe is a doctor of veterinary medicine, a DVM, that also has some particular training in nutrition, maybe a PhD in animal nutrition in addition to that. So those are the people I look for. I'll give you another little analogy. If I'm going to the store to buy groceries for myself, I'm not going to go up and ask the person who's stocking the shelves what's the best nutrition for me to eat. So you might think about your source of who you're going to. Usually I recommend people go to their veterinarian or the staff at the veterinary clinic and ask them their nutritional questions, because at least they have some professional training and expertise in that area. There are other people that are quite knowledgeable in that area too, so just consider the source when you're looking for that. How do I read a pet food label? Now this is one of the real tricky things, and I brought some pet foods that we carry here at our clinic in just to kind of give an example of that. One of the things that I want to point everybody to is there's a little statement on the side of them. It's called the AAFCO statement, and that's the Association for American Feed Controllers, and that is the regulatory agency. It's a nonprofit that actually controls animal feeds and pet foods as well in the United States, and so people look to them for nutritional things. They're like the ones that set the standards for what we're supposed to do. So every food should have an AAFCO statement on it, and there's a couple of different things with the AAFCO statement. For example, these say this food has been tested through AAFCO approved feeding trials and has been shown to give adequate nutrition for dogs of the various ages that they claim to have. Some of the other foods out there will say formulated according to AAFCO accepted guidelines, and that means they followed a formula that's generally accepted by AAFCO as giving the proper nutrition for pets. But the ones that have had the feeding trials, that's actually a higher standard of care. And so these premium foods, if you're paying a premium dollar, you should look for one that's actually used feeding studies, because that means they're doing research on it, and that makes it have a little more credibility in my eyes. As far as ingredient list, a lot of times people worry about what's on the ingredient list, but that can be very deceiving. There's things called ingredient splitting. You could search for that a little bit more and find out more about that. But what that means is there can be two different ingredients instead of one that are basically the same thing. I'll give you an example. Maybe ground yellow corn versus white corn. That might, if they split those, then it's a lower amount of each one of them. They can put both of those on the label, and if you put them together, it might be the most common thing on the label. But if they're separate, then chicken or beef or whatever other ingredient they're trying to make look better can show up to the top. So it's really confusing. So what I recommend, the most important things to look for on labels is I would look for where it's manufactured. You can see on this one right here, there's a little US sticker right there, and then they talk right below there about how it's all made in our own USA facilities with the highest quality ingredients from North America, Europe, and New Zealand. So they aren't bringing products from parts of the world that you might not trust the ingredients to be from. So that's one thing. The other is just look at the brand. If you know a brand and you trust that brand, for example, these are all Hill's products. Hill's makes the Science Diet, they make the Prescription Diet. It's just one of the brands we carry that I trust. And knowing that you trust the brand means a lot more than trying to figure out that label otherwise, because many times you're going to look at those ingredients, you're going to think you know what you're looking for, but it's really hard, and it takes a lot of expertise to know exactly, just based on reading ingredients, what's going on in a pet food. So I'm recommending those things. All right, now get on to the next part, fad diets and diet myths. We've noticed a lot of people are really jumping on the fad diet bandwagon. One of the most common fad diets is grain-free. And this, I call it a fad diet because not all pets have problems with grains. So it's not a problem to have grains if your pet doesn't have any allergies or aversions or difficulty digesting grains. So it's a myth that all dogs should be on a grain-free diet. I kind of equate that to the human side of where people are on a gluten-free diet. Very few people actually need a gluten-free diet. The ones that do should be on it. Same thing with grain-free in dogs. So most dogs can have grain, don't have to have grain-free. Another myth is that corn is bad. People have touted corn as like a filler or some ingredient that's not really good for dogs. Actually, corn is highly digestible by the dog's digestive tract, and it's not a bad ingredient. Of course, it should be balanced with other good nutrition. You don't want to feed your dog only corn. So that's a myth that is bad. There's several other myths and things that you can look for. One of the other myths is that dogs should eat what I eat. And the reason I bring up this one is there's some companies that are putting ingredients in there that we know are real healthy for us, and they're putting those in there just to make the food sound more healthy for the pet. But that's a myth. They don't really need a lot of the same nutrition that we do. They're carnivores, we're omnivores, so obviously you're not going to feed a pet a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet because they're carnivores. Whereas with us, that might be a very good thing to do, depending on yourself and your nutritional requirements. All right, so I've just covered a few basic things just to recap a little bit. Trying to figure out what to feed your pets. Go to a very good reputable source. Feed a diet that is from a label that you trust. Another brand we carry is Purina. Purina has really expensive to very less expensive foods, and they have kind of everything in between, but at least within that brand you kind of get what you pay for. I'm not plugging them, I'm not plugging Hills. I'm just saying that those are a couple of brands that I trust them to do the things that they're saying they're doing. There's a lot of other ones spending a lot of money on advertising and things that may not be quite as good as the diets that don't spend quite as much on that and spend more on research. And also avoid jumping on the fad diets, avoid believing all the myths about dog foods that are out there. And I hope this has helped a little bit. Obviously we can't cover everything, and you have to consider your budget and many other things when you're talking about food and nutrition, but I hope this helps. Thanks again from Allphin Veterinary Clinic. This is Dr. Owen Allphin.